Annie never remained silent out of forgetfulness. It hurt. Her truth has since evolved. Few voices ever captured the spirit of America like John Denver's. Despite everything we believe to be true about Annie's song, he was more than just a vocalist. He was a generation's voice. An iconic figure who had the ability to transform a straightforward acoustic tune into a hymn of love, hope, and desire. However, beneath those serene rural harmony and happy smiles lay a tempest of intense hardships, heartaches, and secrets that the general public was unaware of until recently. And it all begins with Annie Dembo, the woman who served as the inspiration for his most well-known song. Annie Dembo finally spoke forward at the age of 78. Even the most devoted John Denver fans were taken aback by what she disclosed. The song has been regarded for decades as a timeless, poetic love message that is straightforward and lovely. However, Annie showed something more nuanced and relatable. That classic tune, which is frequently sung at anniversaries and weddings, was really inspired by one of their most trying times together. It wasn't composed while having a romantic picnic or taking a stroll beneath the stars on a honeymoon. A quarrel gave birth to it. It was 1973. Aspen, Colorado, where John and Annie Denver already resided, was a haven that John had discovered on one of their numerous camping excursions. In addition to being their home, Aspen would turn into a hallowed location that served as a catalyst for much of Denver's artistic brilliance. His soul was moved by the open skies, sharp air, and majestic peaks. However, their home was more tense that year than mountaineer. After a furious dispute one morning, John went skiing by himself. Something odd occurred when using the Ajax chair on Aspen Mountain. He started to create words in his head. A melody's lines started to flow naturally. He quickly returned home after reaching the summit, grabbed his guitar, and composed Annie's song in 10 minutes. An invention that would last forever emerged 10 minutes after the war. In a subsequent and frequent interview, Annie Denver acknowledged that the song was more than just a love ballad. Even now, decades after their divorce, it remains a musical apology, a plea, and a peace offering. Annie admits that it wasn't just a song and that she still gets emotional every time she hears it. It was the final remnant of a love that existed and might always exist in the back of your mind. On September 6, 1946, Annie Denver was born in Minnesota as Annie Martel. She spent the majority of her early years in calm simplicity and was brought up in a close-knit Christian home with 3 siblings. All of that changed in 1966 when she met John Denver, a young, gifted musician who was just another guy attempting to break with a band called the Chad Mitchell Trio. Denver was immediately captivated by Annie's modest beauty and resilient nature while she was a sophomore at Aldo's College in St. Peter. Soon after, they met up once more, and what had begun as a correspondence between two idealistic people swiftly evolved into a passionate romance. 9 months later, they tied the knot. She was present when it all started. The handwritten notes, the little engagements, and the times Denver offered free shows to promote himself. She provided the guy who would eventually dominate American radio with silent assistance. Annie watched as Johnny transformed Babe I Hate to Go into the song Leaving on a Jet Plane, a song that Peter, Paul, and Mary made famous, and the initial indication that this young New Mexico musician was meant for greater things. The ascent of John Denver was also meteoric. From Rocky Mountain High to Take Me Home Country Roads, he came to represent both the emotional terrain of a generation in search of purpose and the unspoiled beauty of America. He encapsulated both national pride and personal longing in each verse. His records were a huge hit. In the US and the UK, he hosted his own shows and made appearances on television specials. People paused to listen to him sing. However, as his notoriety increased, his marriage started to feel the strain. John acknowledged, in a 1983 interview, that his relationship suffered as a result of the fame that drove his music. "We began to drift away," he remarked. "It was related to the time we weren't spending together and the rigidity with which we reintegrated our lives after we got back together." Despite his composure, his statements were laden with years of regret over missed phone calls, hotel rooms, and tour buses. However, Annie had a different interpretation of the facts. In subsequent interviews, she disclosed that she was merely too inexperienced and mentally unprepared to deal with her husband's unexpected celebrity. She had lost her sense of self. Her name was not Annie Martel. Annie Denver wasn't even her name. The fact that she was John Denver's wife gradually crushed her soul. For years, they made an effort, but after 15 years of marriage, they got divorced in 1982. The majority of celebrity separation are destructive, acrimonious, and messy. Not theirs, though. Annie is still nice while talking about her ex-husband today. She remained unmarried. Anna, Kate, and Zachary, their 2 adopted children, were reared by her, and she established a peaceful life away from the spotlight of celebrity in Colorado. She never managed to escape the influence of his music, though, as each time she hears that well-known tune, my senses are awakened. She is transported to a bygone era when love was unadulterated, novel, and in its infancy. However, John Denver was a guy at war with himself behind his kind songs and joyful performances. Henry John Deutschendorf Jr. was born in Roswell, New Mexico. On December 31st, 1943, his father was a distinguished pilot in the United States Air Force. His father was emotionally aloof and harsh due to his family's many moves. Shy and introverted young John found it difficult to fit in. He didn't discover his voice until he was 11 years old, when his grandmother gave him a guitar. His lifeblood was that instrument. He learned how to play on his own. By the time he enrolled at Texas Tech, he was singing at local clubs and had written songs in secret. However, he continued to go by his given name until a folk singer recommended a change. John Denver's voice was more American and crisper, and it complemented the persona he would soon develop. He relocated to Los Angeles to pursue music full-time after leaving college. He subsequently departed the Chad Mitchell Trio to pursue a career of his own. Everything altered because of that choice. He published Rhymes and Reasons in 1969, although it didn't happen right away. Peter, Paul, and Mary eventually took up leaving in a jet plane. Abruptly, doors opened. His tunes started to play on radio stations. He secured local performances. He offered free performances. Word got out slowly. This young man with the guitar and the yearning voice had a certain quality. He shot to fame with his second album, Poems, Prayers, and Promises. People couldn't get enough of it. He started to appear frequently on TV. More than 60 million people watched Rocky Mountain Christmas, his holiday program. He was recognized as one of the most adored voices in America. Few were aware, however, that the very accomplishment that made him happy also made him depressed. He struggled with loneliness, insecurity, and an increasing alcohol dependence behind the scenes. His use of LSD and marijuana, which some saw as a necessary component of the artistic lifestyle, fueled the flames of his reputation as a lousy alcoholic. He was at the top of the world thanks to his fame, but it also kept him apart from the people he cared about the most. 1988 saw the start of his second marriage to Australian actress Cassandra Delaney, which terminated after only 3 years. Later on, she would characterize him as domineering and vengeful. The marriage had disintegrated by 1991, but their daughter, Jessie Bell, was born in 1989. Denver's problems became worse. Due to his intoxicated driving, he was arrested twice. The FAA revoked his pilot's license after he crashed his Porsche into a tree. Fans did not see the quiet man on stage like this. This person was on a downward spiral. However, John Denver never wavered in his dedication to causes greater than himself. Even at his darkest moments, he collected funds for pediatric hospitals. He made a donation to environmental charities. He created a wildlife reserve. The demons never abandoned him, despite his humanitarian endeavors remaining as earnest as ever. And the unimaginable occurred in 1997. John Denver boarded his tiny homemade route in Long Azzy for what ought to have been a straightforward flight. However, the plane had problems. The location of the gasoline selecting valve was subpar. It was challenging to read the gasoline gauges. He lost control when he passed over Monterey Bay. The aircraft plunged into the Pacific Ocean. He passed away right away. His age was 53. We'll learn about the startling debates after his passing in the following section. The technical malfunctions that caused the collision and the legacy that endures despite speculation about his true identity behind the scenes. It was expected that October 12, 1997, would be another calm day along the California coast. However, news started to surface on all of the main stations around dusk. John Denver, the father of 3, environmentalist, and musical icon of America, passed away. His test aircraft had plummeted into the waters around Monterey Bay. He was only 53, and in that instant, the world lost not just a vocalist but also a voice for emotional transparency, environmental harmony, and subdued revolt. However, what actually transpired with that last flight, and why were there so many unresolved questions? Something startling was disclosed in the National Transportation Safety Board's NTSB official report. Denver's airplane was not your average plane. It had a long easy and a path. It featured multiple serious design problems and had been constructed by an amateur hobbyist. The selection for the fuel tank inside the debris. An unmailed letter that Denver had written in the days prior to the collision was found by investigators. It was a very personal statement, according to family sources, even though its contents were never made public. Part admission, part farewell. He had a feeling that something was about to happen, and Annie Denver had also sensed it. Months later, Annie made a rare appearance at a memorial service in Aspen, where she spoke softly to a crowded audience of friends, musicians, and strangers. "He lived with such fire," she murmured, her voice trembling. "It occasionally burned brightly. It occasionally burnt too quickly. However, the songs that came from that fire gave us a sense of being seen." She then said something off mic that was heard by a few people in the front row. Whether in planes or his dreams, he was always in the air. I only wish he had remained grounded this time. She had never discussed their lives together in public with such candor because John Denver had serious flaws despite all the praise. In relationships, he was domineering and prone to outbursts of rage. Furthermore, he frequently experienced anger that he did not comprehend, despite his outward persona as a man of peace. Every day was plagued by his identity issues. his alienation from his strict father, and his persistent dread of not being good enough Annie. However, wants the world to comprehend something. It was more than just a love song. It was an appeal for kinship, an appeal to keep in mind what matters most while all else fades. She didn't get married again. She still resides quietly and contentedly in Colorado, surrounded by books, pictures, and the sound of birds in the pines. She occasionally receives letters from random people, such as someone who played Annie's song at their wedding, or someone who overcame a difficult time thanks to John's advice. She is reminded by those letters that even though John Denver is no longer with us, his spirit continues to sing via songs, memories, and the quiet that exists between each word he was unable to utter, as if his song is still evoking strong emotions in you. And sign up for more tales that uncover the personalities behind the myths.